This man and I became fast friends once I started covering live theater at the Chance in Anaheim. Today, he is now directing a play at the Chance Theater entitled The Chinese Lady, premiering on May 16th. Shinshin Tsai, how are you today?
I am so good, my friend. Thank you so much. I am very excited.
Listen, we're going to be a little bit biased here because we have become friends and we are enjoying cracking jokes. But I have not seen a bad performance at the Chance, and this is the reason why we become friends because you guys have been so good to me, and there hasn't been a bad production yet. Fingers crossed it'll continue that way. And here we are talking about the Chinese Lady, which is based on a true story.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping not to break that track record of bad things. Um, but yeah, the Chinese lady is Afong Moy is a historical figure. She is the first recorded Chinese woman to ever set foot in America, and she does so as part of an exhibit by the Carnes brothers, who are peddling their Chinese wares to the American public. And so they have this nifty little exhibit that they're doing, where she is the main focus, and she is showing off the ways that Chinese people live. Um, and you know, it's an evolution of that journey. So it's very much um, it's a true person, true history, and Lloyd Suh takes this story and runs with it with beautiful poetry and theatricality.
The scary thing about this is because this has been hidden from Western history, at least in the last, 50 to 80 years, in that she isn't the first person ever to be put on display in a museum. I mean, the French did this when they brought in Africans and put them in living zoos. I mean, this was called a living zoo at the time.
Yeah, 100%.
How like when did you discover her story? And how disheartening is it that this is something that we've erased from American history? Because yes, America has had some serious tragedies and missteps, but it's something that still should be talked about.
100%. It's interesting, right? It's a really interesting question. The play puts a lot of thoughts forward, and it takes the audience through a really um, a long look at ourselves. Disheartening is certainly a word that like has come up for me, um, but most days I leave excited and hopeful because I think it's an opportunity to bring a part of history that our audiences aren't aware of, and I think it's in that discovery that what Afong Moy, our lead character, is trying to do in the show is to bridge these gaps in cultural understanding of who we are to one another. And I think it's in that discovery for the audience and not knowing about this person and not knowing some events that occur in her life and in our history. Um, I think that puts us in a really good place to want to learn and understand. Uh, I'm actually very hopeful these days. It's shocking to say the least, that like even myself, I was exploring these events that I had like some understanding of, but Afong Moy is somebody again that I didn't necessarily even know about until like I came across this show and did more research about it.
Right. And, I mean, it's a heavy topic, but it's something that still needs to be discussed.
Absolutely. It's and like you were saying, right, to your point earlier, she is not the first person to be put on exhibit. There are other they were labeled freak shows, right? Like these moments in museums and circus where we ostracized and exoticized and othered people from around the world for our benefit. So it's an interesting notion to sort of put this show on stage. And I think it's a wonderful show because in history, she wasn't given a voice. We didn't hear her, we only observed her. The show, I think, seeks to reclaim her story and allows us to hear her voice as she probably intended and wanted to be heard and seen.
The thing with her story that's so unique is that, throughout history, we've had the Silk Road. I mean, we've had transportation and exchange and merchants and everything going from China into Europe across all of Asia. So this cross-culturalism shouldn't be a big surprise to anybody. Yet for some reason, the way it came in France and England and then in the United States, putting people in a museum just seems so unfathomable.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? And I think that's like such a great point to bring up. It's one thing, and the show like touches on this as well, right? It's one thing for us to understand that like the tea we're about to receive is from China. I
Right.
think it's another thing entirely to like see the person who made this tea happen, whose core identity, seeing, appreciating, and possibly appropriating. Um, and so I think uh, um, with a lot of things for human nature, it comes from a place of wanting to understand, comprehend, but the approach of that comprehension is misguided, right? That approach is like, let's put somebody in a looking glass and just like observe them and strip away any humanity they have, so that we can sort of uh, boil them down to what are they different from me.
Right.
So I think it's a different notion to sort of understand that like here are things that come from around the world that I have no core concept of where it came from, minus like it came from a place. And then seeing that person in front of us and trying to like comprehend what we've been told, how we've been raised, and then truly eschewing that to understand the person.
When you come up with something like this and you discover a play like this, there has to be not only a level of shock and awe, but also a level of anger in that, we as human beings, like, how could we do this to each other? Where do you put the anger aside in that regard? And where do you use it as righteous indignation in finding the balance between the two in the storytelling?
Um, it's a great question. It's interesting because for me, and also the characters I see, it's a two-person show, right? Um, but for me, it's not so much anger as it's sadness and
Mhm.
also a desire to improve and want to better society. And our characters in the show don't express a lot of anger. Well, how do I say that? The show is an entire journey, right? The show is an entire journey. It's one person's entire life. And of course, there's going to be so many colors to the fabric of her story. And she definitely explores anger and indignation in discovering what America has become, is, and like isn't, right? But we also enter a place where anger is not necessarily either the answer. The true mission of wanting to understand continues to ring through no matter what. And I think we end at that same place, right? It's what is done is done. Um, it's important we don't forget it. It's important that we know it. But it's also important that we come with the understanding that knowing who the other person is, seeing the other person, and trying to understand them has to be the goal. And so I think to that end, anger is counterintuitive to that mission. Certainly, it's there because it means we exist, uh, and that we are human, but also um, we can't fight fire with fire. So that's sort of how I would put it.
It's just one of those things. I mean, there is the sadness, there is a moment of anger, there is a moment of, avoiding presentism and using the excuse of, well, that was then, it was 180 years ago. We can just put it in the past. But it's something that should be discussed. And I'm thrilled that you're bringing the Chinese lady to Chance.
Yeah, I'm also really excited and really honored and grateful. Yeah, it's so interesting because it's like this only happened 200 years ago, and then the other side of that is like, wow, this only happened 200 years ago. Um, So it's an interest. I keep vacillating, right? I keep, and part of our approach in the production is that um, this show goes back and forth in time, right? Like we visit all of these pieces of history in their period, but also Afong is talking to us in the now, right? She's explaining like this is where we are, this is how far we've come, this is how far we haven't yet. Um, and so it's a really interesting place to be as we're exploring this production.
You know, you and I have a very unique perspective in Western society, we'll put it this way, because we're both first generation Americans. Both our parents are immigrants, and, you know, we have one foot in the Western world where we're fully not Western. We have one foot in the Eastern world, but we're not fully Eastern. So it's this area for us. It's not 100% this way, it's not 100% that way, and finding the balance between the two. Um, for you also being first generation, how interesting is it to see her immigrant story and then what it's like for her descendants to realize that this was grandma as well?
Um, it's it's sobering, but also I see myself in Afong, and I think a lot of people are going to see themselves in Afong, regardless if they're an immigrant, first gen, always been here, fourth gen, etc., what have you. Because her story, there's a universality to her story, but for me, there's a personal attachment to the show. Afong comes to America, um, and my parents came to America because the belief that America uh, has opportunities that nowhere else can give you. Um, Even if it means you're going to leave behind the roots that you grew up with, even if it means you won't see your family, um, it all has to be worth it because the opportunity of being in America and what that means to be free to pursue what you want to pursue is so powerful and poignant. Um, and so that's sort of where I've related and connected to the story. I think she often comes with this gorgeous, wonderful lens of like discovery and awe and appreciation for America and in all its beauty that it beholds. Um, just like a lot of us do as well. And then I think from there, we also start to understand what America isn't. Yeah, it's a hard thing to encapsulate, but
Is that when you read the script and you can see the heartache in the script and the suffering of her as a person, and then turn around and try to find light moments and reflective moments and moments of, you know, it's, how do I put this? It's not a French film. It's not just continuous misery throughout the hour and a half to 2 hours of the production.
yeah.
How do you find the levity within the struggle while casting your actors and then while having it performed on stage? Like, how much discussion is between yourself as the director and allowing the performers to perform?
It's a great question. I mean, we are so incredibly blessed because Lloyd, the playwright, Lloyd Suh, is so smart with how he writes. His words are poetic, they're funny. Levity is like naturally in the show. It's interwoven throughout the entire production. So it's not as hard as one would think, given the subject matter. Um, but that's the beauty of the show is that we're able to explore um, all the nuances of what it means to be an American, and what it means to be an immigrant in America, and what it means to be like Chinese American or ex-American. Um, and so I think a lot of people are going to recognize, again, they're going to recognize themselves in this show. And I think those are moments of humor that are just naturally introduced. And then it's just up to me to make sure I don't get in the way of what the play wants to be. And then to be clear, the actors are amazing. They're phenomenal. We had our first read and I was laughing and I was like, oh my God, this is great. I'll see you guys at opening. Um, and so the actors are just running with the show, and I'm just trying to like keep up to make sure that everything else is set for them, that we're trying to continue to support the show and what it asks us to do. Um, and I think we're well on our way. So
You know, when the cast has come together, it's primarily a four-person cast on stage. Michelle, Michelle, I'm going to butcher your last
Michelle
name.
Kruznik, yeah, Michelle
Thank you.
Kruznik and Albert Park.
Yeah.
To
Well,
clarify, it's
Albert Park
the
was
two.
easy. It's Michelle Kruznik's name that was kind of hard.
No, I hear you. I hear you. No, yeah, but they're phenomenal actors. It's a two-person show, and then we have two understudies, right? So Michelle and Albert are amazing equity actors who have like a litany of credits that, like, when you read them, are just like mind-boggling. How much talent is encapsulated in these two actors, and so they carry the entire show. And then we have our two understudies, Amanda and Kai, who are also so much fun, and they're so bright, and they're so smart too. Um, so I just feel incredibly lucky to be working with these amazing artists, who bring everything and more to the table every time we rehearse.
When you get to sit there with the understudy and the lead actor, you know, and seeing how one is studying the other and figuring out what the other one is doing, how interesting is it when they pick up either each other's mannerisms or one does something with the character that the other didn't, or vice versa, and are like, oh, I kind of like this aspect better versus that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. It's interesting because I think everybody is trying to be in service of the play. And so liking something a little more from somebody else hasn't necessarily crossed my radar. And while when I say this, I don't know if I like truly believe it, but I just haven't come across the opportunity yet of like I haven't seen something that's like, wow, that's how it needs to run the entire time, or that was better, amazing. To be clear, there's a lot of things where I've been like, I think this is like where the show wants to be, and then you leave it to the actors, and they're like, wow, that was much better than I thought it could be. And in those moments, I'm surprised, and I'm like, wow, um, that lifted the show in a way that I couldn't envision. But for like the differences between what our leads and our understudies are doing, um, currently where we are in the production, we're not seeing any of those like deviations, right? There's such a wholehearted encapsulation of what the show is that it's just been really fun to see everybody work and grow and evolve.
Is there ever a moment where, you know, I mean, it's primarily an English script and it's for a Western audience to understand what's going on, but is there ever a moment where, like, you know what, and forgive my ignorance, I wasn't sure if, you know, Afong spoke Cantonese or Mandarin, but is there ever a moment where, like, you know, if she spoke either one, which one, or, you know, which one would be more appropriate and like a line would be punched up better if it was, say, either Mandarin or Cantonese?
100. That's a great question as well, right? It's so interesting because I think she does. She speaks Cantonese. She speaks Cantonese. Like that's historical fact. At that time, a lot of Chinese people who came over from would have spoken Cantonese, and then Mandarin comes in later. Um, what's interesting is that the Lloyd gives us the tool that even though we are speaking English, it's not because we are speaking English, it's because we have removed the barriers of misunderstanding and miscommunication, right? We are speaking to each other heart to heart. And that's why we're able to understand Afong, even though she speaks Cantonese. That's why we're able to understand these nuances in language because she's able to fully explain how she feels and how she looks at the world without the encumbrance of not knowing what the other person is saying. So it's interesting. I don't necessarily find that any of the phrases or thoughts would be more beautiful in Cantonese, but I will tell you there are lines in the show that just sort of blow me away with the level of understanding it wants, right? Like some phrases that are in the show are like Afeng says, if I had the words to truly encapsulate how I was feeling, I would say, um, seeing everybody here and seeing America feels like a flower in awe and appreciation of the sun that gives it the energy and life. I'm paraphrasing, of course, because it's much more poetic in the show. Um, and then there's just these moments that sort of like blow you over with the beauty of language and the beauty of understanding. So that's sort of what I take away from the language in the show.
Right, because like the way I look at it is that like some things don't translate well to English. So like that's why I was wondering if it like punched better in Cantonese if she was expressing
100%.
something, even though we didn't understand, say, the language itself, but understanding the emotion behind it.
Definitely. And she even references that, right? Like though she is speaking English, it's a convention we're using within the show that she's speaking English so we can understand. Um, but like in the show, she mentions a couple times like this is what I want to say. Like in my native tongue, I would say all of this, but all I can say in reality is I'm very excited. Or
Right.
like, yes. Um, so yeah, agreed. It's an interesting notion to consider.
Right. You know, I mentioned that because you haven't been trapped in the car with me on the 405 yet, where there aren't enough English curse words that I have to switch through multiple languages in being able to express my frustration with the Prius in front of me.
I think that is a noble pursuit of language for me to continually express my frustration with the California freeway and highway system as colorfully as I want. I 100% hear that. Agreed.
You know, this just doesn't work. English doesn't have the same veracity that it would in Aramaic or in Arabic or in Greek or whatever else
Exactly.
that we're just throwing out there.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. As the director, and you get to, you know, at some point you know, you're reading the script, you're like, okay, we have to do this. You pitch the idea to the office, and it seems like they were on board from the get-go. Now, as a first generation American whose parents immigrated, who has a similar story to Afang, how do you pull yourself away from the story, being so close to it culturally, and a similar lived experience? Obviously, you haven't been in a human zoo, but there is that similar lived experience, whether it's been racism that you've experienced, cultural bias, mistreatment from this group or that group or whatever else, and now put yourself in the director's chair versus being so close to it.
Yeah. To be clear, if I was putting the exhibit, it'd be the most boring exhibit. That is why nobody has put me in a room to be observed. Um, but yeah, I hear you, right? It's interesting that while we're working on the show, the show asks you to consider where you are, like you as an artist, you as a human, you as a spirit and soul of this world. It asks you to consider where you are and bring that to the table, because it colors the production in a unique way. It's nice that like when you're doing the work, um, you don't have to worry about things um, getting in the way, like your own personal feelings. What's nice is that they color and influence your decision, but they don't hopefully disrupt the story that's trying to be told, right? I keep finding myself asking the question of like, what is Lloyd trying to tell us? What is Afong trying to get us to understand? Um, and if we make this choice, is that clear? Or if we make this choice, are we taking away from the message and the story? I like find myself continually grasping and grappling with.
Yeah. I see. I had no idea about the play till you told me that it was being produced at Chance. And uh, how old is the play itself? And how interesting is it that it could still be relatable to today, especially with the trade wars? I mean, we're not getting into the political aspect of this at this point, but you know, like
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
to see what's going on politically today versus, you know, 190 years ago when her story takes place.
Uh, yes, it's its world premiere was at the public in 2018, I want to say, or 2019. Um, and shortly after that, it's the height of like anti-Asian violence. And so the story, like again, progresses. The play again is performed after that time at the height of this violence. And it continues to be produced around the country because of how poetic and beautiful it is, and how timely it is. It's interesting because while the show is called The Chinese Lady, I also argue it's an American show. And so I think a lot of people come in assuming that we're about to learn a lot of things about China. And in fact, we leave learning a lot of things about ourselves. And so, in that lens, it's both timely and timeless. It's timely because our world is always in flux. Things are always changing, understanding of each other's humanity is always changing. And that's why it's timely. But it's timely or it's timeless because it asks a lot of questions that I don't think we have answers to. And I think we will never have answers to, but it's the pursuit of trying to figure out those answers that make life worth living and make society and communities better.
Have you spoken with Lloyd at all in this regard? Is or does that diminish what you guys are putting on stage in your interpretation of his work? Because sometimes when the writer gets involved, it changes what you guys saw, even it's no longer his. I mean, it's his when he's putting it on paper and on page, but once it's released to the world, it's open to interpretation. So how do you also find that balance in speaking with Lloyd and his original intent versus what's also being presented?
Yes, haven't had a chance to speak with him. He is jet setting around the world, and so we have the distinct pleasure of producing his work because we're just huge fans of him. And he has a great body of work, to be clear. And so he's being produced all over the country. And for for me, it's an interesting thought because I don't find myself. My interpretation of the show is, I think, what he is going for with this story as well. So um, I don't find myself misaligning an interpretation of the show. I'm, and in fact, I'm trying to figure out like what the clearest distillation of what he is saying, and translating that for our production to be as clear as possible, to invite the audience into this world of theatricality and performance, um, to create a better understanding of each other.
Right. You know, I also like the fact that, it's not this we got the license to the show, but it's not going to be 1834 anymore. It's going to be 3187 and we're going to set it in the future and like all this like weird stuff that is in spirit of the original while totally deviating from it. And I'm glad that you're sticking to that balance because I've seen some interpretations of various shows. I'm like, where did you come up with that? So,
100%. Yeah, yeah, I think it's a show that requires us to understand where we are right now for us to really grasp how far we've come. So I just think part of the story is understanding that like it's now, we're here. Let's start.
you know, and from this starting point, obviously there's the evolution of the performer and the evolution of the director. From when you first read this to now we've had our first table read and soon we're going to have our first rehearsals. Like, how do you see yourself reevaluating Shinshin at this point going forward?
Um, yeah, I have been talking to myself so much. I am so glad to be talking to other people about this show. So that's the great thing is that I hate talking to myself. I make nonsense points. But no, I mean, all joking aside, how the production has evolved and changed even as we're entering rehearsal, um, is crazy to me, right? I am always in awe of actors and designers when they come in and they understand, what a show is, what a show needs, and then just lift it even more. And that's sort of the beauty of collaboration from my standpoint of directing is that I come in hopefully with a clear, um, idea, and then I hope that idea is then blossoming into something that like I couldn't even fathom because I have creative people who are passionate, and want to tell a story as well. So my evolution as a director is that I'm consistently humbled and inspired by the people I work with, who asked me to consider things I hadn't considered. And now their POV of the world, or of the work, or of each other, or of themselves influences how I view them and myself and the world. Um, and that's the thing that I'm really excited about. I just keep adding to a growing list of friends who are there to join me on the journey of just trying to understand this thing we call life.
The production value that you guys put in, like, well, let's take Such Small Hands, the last production that you guys ran, and I mean, it got an extended run from February to April. I think it was supposed to end in mid-March and ends the first week of April. There's one part in the set design and the way you guys pulled it off, because I don't want to give spoilers, even though it's past. I don't know what the next guy is going to do with it, but there's moments of various flickering situations that almost to the point where I was like, do I need to have my eyes checked? Because I'm looking around and I'm going, wait a minute. And it's just something that's going on with the lighting and something that hints at his cognitive decline. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just so beautiful to that performance. When you have something like that for something like Such Small Hands, and you go into the Chinese lady, how do you also try to make it your own unique thing versus the production that was in Phoenix, versus the production that was in Chicago, versus what they're going to see in Dallas? Because each theater company has a different budget and has its own level of creativity with the set designers.
Yeah, I love the work we produce. And again, so grateful that Such Small Hands had an amazing run. That was a fantastic cohort of creatives. And we're still just not dealing. We are still benefiting and experiencing the positive reception um, from the audience. So it's really lovely that all of that is still in play from Such Small Hands to carry us into the Chinese lady. I've always said that the chance the chance is known for intimate productions, but it's also something built into its DNA that how do we tell a story clearly? How do we tell a story in a way or a perspective that we haven't seen before? So it's not so much I'm interested in how our production is going to be differing from other productions, because again, I think they all have valid takes. Um, and who's to say somebody else's interpretation is more correct or less correct than mine? But what I strive to do with this production is, like I think every single production that happens at the chance, it's what does the play ask us to do to tell a story, and how can we uplift that? How can we push that idea further? Um, and what unknown are we going to arrive at that surprises and delights us? Um, these are all the things that like I have in my radar.
Yeah. I'm coming opening night on the 16th, Friday the 16th. I'm excited for it because I get to see it with the very first set of eyes in the audience. Um, for patrons that have either, subscribers that have their membership with the chance or people that are buying their individual tickets, what are you hoping that the first wave of opening weekend get from the story?
I'm I'm hoping that audiences leave surprised, um, with a renewed sense of wanting to understand those around them and their community. Um, and I hope they leave triumphant in their desire to better understand the world. Um, and I'm hoping that like first preview, right? Like first preview, we see what we've been working at lands on audiences, or if not, then we see how we can adjust and pivot to make sure that it's further clear for an audience. But I hope the audience leaves with a better understanding of who they are and where they fit in society so that they can better understand others in society.
You know, and because situations like this, whether it's regarding race or culture or custom or language, has become a very touchy subject. How do we open the dialogue up after seeing the Chinese lady?
Yeah, it's the Chinese lady does like this gorgeous thing where like we talk about history, but we don't attribute blame, right? It doesn't say things are happening because X group is immoral, evil, nefarious. It lists facts for us and leaves us to decide um, why that happened and what occurred and how can we change. Um, but I think it invites people to learn things they may not know or to refresh them on what they may have learned once or heard once. Um, and then it also invites the question of like, this is where we are, or it asks you to consider where you are, right? Um, and then you're left with, well, where can we go from here? So I think my goal is to make sure people want to know and figure out and ask, where do we go from here?
Well, I am
What that
excited to
answer
see this
is,
production. Yeah.
I'm so eager to discover. Yeah, no, exactly.
I'm eager to see it too because it looks like it's going to be one of those heart-wrenching, thought-provoking plays that the chances notorious for putting on. And especially with the last one being such small hands, now going into the Chinese lady. Chinese lady is running May 16th through June 8th, which I'm presuming is going to get extended, just like such small hands, especially if it has a similar production value. Um, your costume designers and then your stage designers, we got to give them as much respect as possible. Who worked on the set design for this and the costumes?
Yeah, so Christopher Scott Murillo, who has been working with the Chance for I think like well over like 10, 20 productions at this point, is our scene designer. You would have last seen his work in Gloria. But at any given point, if you were to like just stand somewhere and throw a pebble in any direction, you can guarantee that like he's working on that production. He has a hand in it. He's probably in several different texts simultaneously. So he is an amazing, amazing artist, and I'm so grateful to have him because he just brings such a keen, wonderful insight to the world. And I'm just ecstatic about the set. I find myself drooling over it every single day. Grace is our costume designer. She is so bold and so smart and puts such intricate thoughts into clean designs that I'm really excited for everybody to see as well. I think there's such a gorgeous story that's just being told in the costuming. Again, I'm always bewildered by how well our designers can tell stories um, in every single facet that they pursue. And then our sound design designer, Jesse. He's also just this smart, understanding, nuanced, and specific designer who I think is just going to help us lift the show. Masako is our lighting designer. She's a resident artist, but she is also our technical director. So I feel incredibly lucky that I can be like, man, I sure wish these lights could possibly do this. And not only she's like, I think we can make that happen. I know we can make that happen, and I'll do you two times better. So Masako is also just a genius. Um, and then yeah, I am surrounded. I am surrounded by people who are so brilliant and so creative. And I'm just so inspired by it all.
And then shout out to Jeff working the door that tolerates my nonsense. So we got it covered all
Mr.
the way around.
Hellebrand. That's right, that's right. Mr. Hellebrand, man. No, I hear you.
Yeah. Just to remind everybody again, the Chinese lady, May 16th through June 8th. We're looking for an extension because we just expect that from the Chance Theater at this point, especially with word of mouth and everything that's coming along. Written by Lloyd Suh, directed by Shinshin Tsai, or Tsai, forgive me for the mispronunciation.
You're good, brother.
Chance Theater, ER in theater. We got to make sure about that. Uh, where can we purchase tickets and where can we find you and the theater on social media if we want to keep the conversation going?
Yeah, at Chance Theater, Facebook.com/Chance Theater, all ER. Type in Chance Theater on Google. I hope we pop up. if our SEO is correctly adjusted. Um, Tickets are on sale right now. Our first few performances, the 16th through the 23rd, are pay what you can previews. We want to make sure that theater is accessible to all, as is part of our mission. And so tickets are as low as $10 with inclusive fees. And then we'll have tickets that are 30% off for the rest of the run to make sure that theater continues to be accessible. We have special events. I want to like lift those up, right? We have like awesome special community events that are free to the community to just come participate in and watch the show. Go to chancetheater.com, and if you have any questions, send us an email, give us a call. We'd be happy to talk you through it.
Right. And remind, because there's two theaters in the chance, remind everybody which theater it's going to be in.
100%, right? We have two stages. Our the Chinese lady will be on the Cripe stage.
Yeah. Because you are stuck with me twice that weekend because on Friday I'm going to be in the Cripe stage with you for the Chinese lady, and then on Saturday I'm coming back for Sentences with the Larking House that has the Fight Amar stage, which is literally a 45-degree angle from the other.
Yep, no, it's going to be so much fun. That is a weekend packed of artistry, amazing people, and it's a world premiere. I'm so excited. The Larking House is a fantastic ensemble group and theater company, so I am so excited for them, and I'm so happy to be sharing a space with them.
I'm excited for them. I'm excited for you. Chance Theater, beautiful theater, not a bad seat in the house. We got to remind everybody where the address is and how they can find everybody coming to the Chance because we are going to Anaheim. It's in a great location, ample parking, which is what we care about. Ticket service phone number is 888-455-4212. Shinshin, stick around for a couple of minutes. We got to catch up on a couple of other things. But thank you so much for today.
Thank you guys. Can't wait to see you. Love the chat.